clock, Padraig. You been on the clock lately?
No, not in a few years, actually. I'm pretty good at that nowadays.
20 minutes with Padraig Harrington is never enough. So, Niall, I think we'll bring you in right at the start to maybe explain to everyone what exactly Orreco do.
Hi, good afternoon, everybody. We analyse data for elite teams and athletes. In terms of what our key areas of focus, three key areas. We work on biomarkers, which are primarily through blood profiling, data analytics, so that could be anything from analysing the GPS data for an NBA player or a professional league footballer, and then also recovery solutions, which are very topical at the moment. So that could be detailed nutrition, sleep optimization for someone like Padraig when he's traveling around the world, working on heat, cold for Formula One, and compression. And then all three areas are intrinsically linked, and then what we try to do is then create roadmaps for athletes like Padraig and our other elite athletes and teams.
So this relationship with Orreco, Darren touched on the majors, we're looking at the photos there. This actually started right around the time that you started winning your majors.
It started in 2007. I would traditionally have a problem, as a lot of athletes, where we got to where we are by doing more work than everybody else. So if you go and see any athlete, the way to beat the guy beside you is do more than him. And that's fine when you're young, when you're in your 20s, pretty much anything sticks at that stage. But as you mature as an athlete, and golf is a great sport that we actually have a longer career than probably anything out there, you got to get it right. And I had a constant problem of overdoing things, pushing the limits, always pushing the limits. And I have a good trainer here at home, Liam Hennessy, and he brought Orreco to me. And right from the start, it was perfect for me. I have a lot of information coming in, but Orreco gave me actionable data that was a fact. It's anchored in blood work. So basically every month we get my blood's done, and there's a marker in there, a biomarker, and it can actually factually say whether I'm good to go, whether I'm in an amber state where I've just got to pay attention and watch what I'm doing, or whether I've got to stop. And ultimately, for me or for other athletes, if you get that one where you're in trouble, I'll take weeks off. I'll just stop, won't go play tournaments.
You actually listen to what they say every time, or sometimes do you choose to ignore it?
Oh, it's indisputable. I've got to listen. If you don't listen at that stage, something chronic's going to happen. You're going to find yourself. Obviously, playing stale golf would be one, but you're actually going to end up getting injured. Your body has a great ability even though you don't listen to it, it will figure out how to get a rest. And if that means getting you injured so that you'll stop, that's what it will do. And we've seen it. I know we were just discussing this recently. I assume it's not private information, but Orreco, working with a team, have saved them, we reckon, about 700 days for players. So essentially it was about 4 players extra they had in their squad based on Orreco doing the work, keeping them fit, keeping them from breaking down, keeping them from getting injured. And as I said, the biggest key with athletes is, if things aren't going well or at any stage, we want to do more. We constantly want to practice, work harder, do more than the next guy. And ultimately, sometimes that's not the solution. It's okay when you're 16 or 18 or 22, but once you get to 44 years of age,
Never.
as I always point out, I'm older than Roy Keane, and he's retired like 8 years or something like that. So golf is a strange sport. It's probably the best sport for the human population to look at in terms of, most people when they hit their 40s, they start slowing down and they've got to figure out a way. They can't eat as much. They've got to go and find a way of training. And golf is pretty much like that. It's the one sport that you're trying to keep going. At 44 years of age, you're trying to compete. And the great thing for me, and this is part of the work with Orreco, I actually swing the club now with more speed than I have at any stage in my career. So physically, I'm as capable as I've ever been.
There can't be many aspects of your career that you don't question almost incessantly.
As I said, I've been known as a tinker. I've tried everything. In terms of my training, I would have a number of ways of telling where I am in the training cycle. Instinctively, I'm pretty good, but I'm so capable of ignoring that, and this is where Orreco comes in. It gives you actionable data that's right there. It's a fact. You can't do anything about it. You know your situation, and I take note. Whereas, if I wake up tired, another day, and I didn't have this information, I say, just work your way through it and just keep going. And it's hard to tell with golf, as I said, because there's so many things out in the golf course that can happen. But ultimately, if you're stale, you make terrible decisions. You make just, rotten decisions, and that's when it leads to, poor performances.
Niall, you are the commercial director with Orreco, which maybe gives the impression that you're a sales guy, but you're coming from a sporting background. You represented Ireland at the Olympics in '96. You've worked with Manchester United on the commercial side, and I guess that's important as well, because this needs to be able to transfer to the athlete, that you're not stopping them doing things that they will want to do, that you're getting there before they enter the red zone.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, as you said, in a previous life, guys, I was a professional athlete, so I think I can speak credibly with regards to what Orreco do, because the reality is I actually had a career-ending injury. So looking back, I wish I had Orreco when I was a professional athlete. So I actually had to retire and get a real job. So I can completely relate to the message that we're giving to professional athletes now. So Padraig talked about the fact-based stuff. He's completely right. Orreco, everything that we bring to the athlete is evidence-based. We work with up to over 2,000 elite level athletes as well. So I think we really enhance the decision making and make them more informed, as Padraig rightly said. Tell them when to push, but also more importantly, when to back off as well. I think that's really important. Sometimes one step backwards is 2 steps forward. And we work very closely with Dr. Liam Hennessy, as Padraig said, and we complement that work that he's already doing.
How does the relationship work then over the course of the year? I guess at your stage of your career, you've had such a hugely successful career that time is probably your most precious commodity, that you don't want to be committing huge periods of time to this every day or every week.
The great thing, I'm self-managed, so it's up to me to decide exactly what I want to do at any stage during the year. It's not time consuming, and to be honest, I would say I've dropped a lot of the other ways of measurements, and I rely on Orreco more now than ever to give me the information. So it's actually saved me time. There's less clutter. There's less, to be honest, there's less data now that I'm relying on Orreco a lot more. It's pretty simple for the player. For me, I'm away quite a bit, so essentially I come home once a month, get this done. It gives me a good idea where I'm at. Not too often, and generally I don't get too many surprises. The odd time I get a surprise where, okay, I didn't realize I was that bad, or I didn't realize I was that good. And as Niall said, sometimes, you can get a good reading that says, yeah, you're okay, let's keep going, let's keep pushing it. In my case, I always have to be mindful of overdoing it. And it is interesting, I can't comprehend the athletes that has to be told to do more. So there might be somebody out there that needs to be told to push it a little bit more. But in general, I'm of the thing of, right, I'm pretty much thinking about this, working on this full time every day. So I need a way of monitoring it so that I don't overdo it, and this is ideal.
You're on your holidays now for the next
9 weeks off.
Well, you had 7 weeks off, was it, last Christmas, and you set yourself a target of 100,000 swings?
I gave up after a few weeks. My bloods were dreadful, to be honest. I lost speed doing it. But, I like to try, and this is a period of time you like to experiment. I have 9 weeks off. Now, in the 9 weeks, I have to figure out a way of getting all my training done in the gym, getting all my practice done on my golf swing, and getting rest. And it's a very hard combination to get the 3 of those things in together. It's difficult. As I said, the rest is the one that I struggle with at times. But you got to work on it. And as 9 weeks sounds like a lot, it will go very quickly. I've plenty of things planned in that time, and as I said, there'll be a couple of good bloods taken to make sure, okay, things are good, and we'll set out a strategy, as I said, with Orreco, with my trainer Liam Hennessy, about how much rest and how much work I can do.
That strategy, when it's set out for the start of the year, are you aiming to be at peak fitness for the 4 majors?
I want a plateau for the year. I know that sounds like it's a long period of time, so maybe a couple of plateaus during the year. Yes, my year is totally judged on how I do in the majors, no doubt about it. But, in the end of the day, peaking peaking can be very dangerous. You know, we could see it. You can go to the recent World Cup of rugby. You know, every team that peaked seemed to lose the game afterwards. You know, it's a dangerous thing to try and get yourself to peak. You know, I think in modern days now, athletes are talking, unless you're an Olympic athlete, which comes around every 4 years, but mostly athletes are talking about trying to sustain themselves on plateau for a period of time. Clearly, you can't do that for a year. And what we've seen in golf, or certainly I've seen in golf, is players have a good season. They might play well all the way through the summer, win a major. When they win a major, there's certain incentives offered to them in the winter to go and play, appearance fees. So they will go and they'll end up playing through their winter and then start again the following year. So they'll probably play well for 15 months and then they'll fall off after that because they didn't get the break during the winter. It's essential in all sport to have those breaks. You'll see it, and Orreco would have the data on this. Soccer players who end up playing a full season, they go into a World Cup, they get no summer break, they start off again in August. They'll play well at the start of August and September. But the amount of those players, and you can listen to this for your fantasy football, sell them in October, get rid of them. Because if they've played well for, 13, 14 months solid, the body can't do that physically, and this is where the Orreco, the bloods will show this. You cannot do it, and you are performing. And the problem is, they will perform well in that 13th and 14th month, so they won't necessarily look back and think it was the lack of break.
Yeah, it's too late.
Ultimately, the bloods would have shown up in August. Hang on a second, you need to step back here. You need to rest. Maybe step away from the training. You can still compete. Not necessarily. You don't have to stop everything. It's not a question of locking yourself in a room for a few weeks. You can still do stuff, but you just can't do it at the same intensity.
Yeah, Niall,
I think it's important to point out that as Padraig said, he's 44 now. We've worked with him since 2007. It's a long-term strategy that we're trying to create with the athletes as well. It's not just about one hit. We'll sit down and we'll map out a month, a year, also a career for someone like Padraig as well. I think that's important that we map out these key workload periods and get ahead of the curve and create longevity for athletes.
And Padraig touched there on footballers, and you deal with Newcastle United in the Premier League as well. Yep. Is it more difficult to deal with clubs, I guess, when you're dealing directly with the athlete and their coaches, that they're more likely to listen to, whereas a football manager who's fighting for his job, if you say, well, this guy, he's at risk of picking up a serious injury, he says he's my main striker, he's the only one I got, are they actually going to listen?
I would say yes and no. I mean, obviously, we'll come with it that we can present the data. We've built up a lot of. It takes time to build up the trust as well, and I believe we've built up trust with Padraig and someone like Dr. Liam Hennessy as well. So they do listen to us and take action on the back of it. Someone like a football team, we'll have conversations with Dr. Paul Catterson, and we'll present the data. Then he has to have the conversation with the manager. Obviously, I think the manager then ultimately is the person that decides what happened. But we will present the evidence-based data and make them more informed, so they can make a more informed decision about their players, and at times back them off. But sometimes they don't listen.
This is the beauty of being an individual. If I'm injured or there's nobody to replace me next week, I can't bring somebody in to sub me in and perform for me in a major. In teams, unfortunately, a lot of clubs will go down the road of, we'll burn the player out and we'll just replace him with the next guy. Some of the, I won't say smaller clubs, say the less financially big clubs, they have to be smarter. That's the only way of competing in the end of the day. But the bigger clubs, like we said with some of the US teams, they're figuring out, because of salary caps, that they do have to get the most out of their players, that they can't afford to have players on the injured list. And in the end of the day, the longer you can keep a player healthy, it's like having extra guys in your team, and it can be the difference between winning or losing at the end of a long season.
I don't want to keep ramming it down your throat that you're 44 now, but because of all this work that's been going on behind the scenes, and so many players are doing this now, do you think players can be more successful later into their careers, into their 50s? Are we going to see that long record of a 48-year-old winning a major championship, that being broken over the next few years?
I do believe your golf has changed over the years. There's certainly the younger guys are winning without experience. It's a bit more of a 100-meter sprint most weeks more than a marathon, which it would have been. 20 years ago, you could afford to be patient on Thursday. Now it's charged right out of the gates. But I do think, physically wise, a as I said, have as much clubhead speed as I've ever had in my career, and I will probably sustain that into my 50s. So physically, I'll be capable of competing at that age. Mentally, you've got to watch for the burnout, and even though I have more experience now, there is a certain element of I've lost my innocence. You know, I'm not as I don't wake up with the butterflies anymore. I'm not as I will love the game, but in a different sort of way. I'm not as enthusiastic. So those things do change, but you will see. I fully expect. I don't expect to be hitting the senior tour when I'm 50. I expect to be still playing on the main tours, trying to win majors. But it is hard to compete against these young guys because they don't respect their elders anymore.
What we're talking about here is elite sports people, but for anybody here who's playing golf or maybe thinking about running a marathon or that next year, is there a way they can access this sort of data?
Yeah, I mean, from an Orreco point of view, that's something we'd like to do. We're very much grounded in elite athletes, and that's our sharp point. But ultimately, from a scale point of view, obviously, we'd like to connect with weekend warriors. Someone like, sadly, myself nowadays, certainly not an elite athlete. But we've recently signed a partnership with IBM Watson, so a hugely exciting partnership. They're very serious players. They've invested $1 billion worth of into IBM Watson. We've partnered with them. We're their first sports performance ecosystem partner. So we will actually start. We're using the Nike Track Club to do as our beta partner. We'll then eventually bring that into other elite athletes and then scale it out to the weekend warriors. So they can take the learnings from someone like a Padraig Harrington and bring it into their game or into a 10K or marathon training as well.
Yeah. What's next for you then, Padraig, after the break?
I really haven't got to that. This 9-week period is just. It's such a big part of my year. I'm very focused on what I'm doing over these 9 weeks. This hugely determines how I perform next year. So it's very much about getting a good handle on this 9 weeks and making sure I can't afford to get it wrong. That is the biggest key. I cannot afford to get this break wrong because I lose another year, and I don't. That through at least onto the end of August, where I finished up the four majors, and next year being a Ryder Cup year and the Olympics, it's a big year. And as I said, you want to figure out how to make sure that you sustain it at least through. As I said, now that I'm thinking about it, the end of September, I'd be happy if I perform up to then I can switch off in some ways at that stage. But if you play well, then all those money events come around at the end of the year. It's a vicious circle in golf in that sense that you can get sucked into trying to compete for 12 months of the year. And an interesting aside, my dad was a Gaelic footballer, and whatever reason he loved the psychology. He always told me you can't play well 12 months of the year, and if you're going to play badly, make sure it's in the winter period because the summer is when it really does count. And I watch that so much in sport. Players, they need to perform for a certain period of the year, but they can't sustain it all the time, and they've got to figure out in their own mind what's important to them, when it's important, and how to get the best out at the right time of the year.
You do have an injury at the moment. Who's to blame for that?
The kids. I've got to get my knee operated. I have a tear in my cartilage from playing tennis with my kids. I put out in the media that I was playing tennis, but the reality is it was running after the tennis balls that my kids were hitting. So it wasn't like I was charging around the court, but it was just a repetitive injury that flared up a bit, and I've managed it quite nicely. And to be honest, I can function without going for the operation. But again, the 9-week period, it's about getting everything tidied up so that I'm ready to go next year.
Yeah, you can't write something to stop somebody picking up the tennis balls.
No, but as Padraig said, though, we will work with him across this rest period as well and map out his year and then help him get ready for the rest of the year, get him ready to perform, basically.
And presumably that takes into account as well the fact there is an Olympics, there is a Ryder Cup, that you want to sustain that plateau for that little bit longer?
Yeah, that is the key. If you were to pick it out, there's 4 majors, the Olympics and the Ryder Cup. for me, I'll concentrate on the 4 majors. I genuinely need to perform pretty much nearly win one of those in order to get into the Olympics and the Ryder Cup. So it's interesting that the Olympics and Ryder Cup, as much as I want to be in them, they're actually at the back of my mind now because I can't make it into the teams unless I do something spectacular outside it. So I don't need to worry about them. Put it like this, if they do happen, it would be a nice problem. And again, if I turn around and make those teams, there will be a little bit of scrambling. I'm going to really look at my training and my periodization to figure out, okay, these are big events. How do I actually make sure that I'm ready to go those weeks? And I said Orreco there'll be a few phone calls to Orreco at that stage. Okay, guys, we weren't expecting this, but we've got to make sure that we're in the best of shape for those weeks.
I suspect he keeps you on your toes the whole time.
Absolutely. No, but it's a great partnership. We're delighted to have him on board, so he's a great ambassador for the company.
All right, brilliant, lads. 20 minutes, never enough with you, Padraig. Niall Bruton, Commercial Director with Orreco, and also Padraig Harrington.
Thank you.